as we start, I'm not going to do the whole I'm Steve and all that kind of stuff because I work for the Llandaff Diocese and my job is to engage young people with faith. So that's my job description, which is brilliant. But this session is about creating a culture of welcome. And I don't know how welcome you feel in church when you come to church. And I don't know where you kind of start from in the whole thought of welcome and things like that. But I thought I'd flash up some latest statistics, if we could put those on please, Rachel. Okay, these are the statistics from the 2020 Church of England report. I haven't got anything for the Church in Wales, but numbers of 0 to 16-year-olds attending Sunday services fell below 100,000 for the first time. 38% of churches have no 0 to 16, 68 have fewer than 5 young people. The attendance of under 16s is declining faster than any other age group in the Church of England. Even among those churches who have 25 or more 0 to 16s, 51% of these groups are still in decline. Anybody depressed yet? The concentration of young people is narrow. 44% of all 0 to 16s are to be found in only 6.4% of the churches or parishes. Okay, that stat up there, the church is emptying of young people and getting greyer by the day. You can brush away that fact and ignore it, or let the sting of those statistics propel you into action. Which is it going to be? So I'm hoping that it's going to be that you actually do something about it, which is why I guess that you're at this seminar this afternoon. If we were in school, like most of my school reports, when I was in school, we could do better. The good news, next slide. The good news, is there any good news? So what I thought, we've literally got about 45 minutes, 40 minutes now, to rush through all this, but is this your experience of church? Is anything working? Is there any growth in your churches? Quick buzz. Hands up, please, for any of those questions. So let's use the enthusiasm that's in the room. Have you got any good news stories? Please speak now, or else we'll be over in a couple of minutes. Actually, we won't. I've got loads to talk about. I've probably got too much to say in the time that we've got. But is there any good news stories? Because I do appreciate that despite those very depressing statistics, some churches are bucking the trend. So, somebody, give me a story.
We have had 2 or 3 families go. Talk louder.
Well, it's being recorded. You are now on that. Oh, you're not. Okay.
Good, that's okay. We have had 2 or 3 families with young people and children join in the last 8 weeks.
Wow.
8 to 10 weeks. They've come in. We've had a couple of people come in with children, stay 1 or 2 weeks and then go.
Yes.
So we're trying to look at how encouraging them back in.
Brilliant.
But yeah, we had these 2 families who met with, I can't remember, Esther's about 7, who's now singing with the worship band. Elizabeth.
It's very much what Rick was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Involved in that.
Yeah, Elizabeth's 14 and Jeremiah's 15 or 17.
And what sort of size church would your typical church be?
This is our church.
Oh, this is your church, but numbers wise?
On average, between 30 and 50,
Fab.
depending on the week and
Brilliant.
the weather.
Yeah, and the weather, ice cream and stuff like that. Any other good news stories? Yeah? Please have a take.
Thank you. In the church that I've only been to for say the last year or so, we have a family service from time to time, at least once a month. It always begins as usual beginning with a plate of cake and
nice.
Drinks, and we sit around the table. We don't sit in church, we sit in the hall. It's directed mainly at the younger members of the family. There's lots of TV videos and what have you. It works extremely well, and it brings in 1 or 2 parents. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to bring in the older members who were regular at church on the Sunday morning.
Is this before COVID?
And after.
Right, yeah.
I really didn't know the church much before COVID.
Right, okay.
In fact, that was why I had to move there because my own church closed.
Right, okay.
So,
Brilliant.
but it's certainly a good way of doing it.
Awesome. So there are good news stories. So I go to Citizen Church in Cardiff, which is what is called the Resource Church. Absolutely thriving. It seems to be bucking the trend with people in church, not just young people. But they're planting and moving out into different areas. I'm just, fly, get off my donuts. Control that fly, that's why it's going to be buzzing around. Okay, so there are good news stories. There are churches that are bucking these statistics. And that's what I wanted from this slide, is to look at that. So in your churches, do you know what you stand for? Do you know what your mission and your values are? So this is the next slide. So I went, this whole question about what is church and stuff like that is really important to know what your church is for, what your target area is, I suppose. What are you just like throwing the net out and trying to get everybody and welcome everybody, or are you kind of specific? So look at these mission goals here. I did a Google search for mission and values. Can I stick the next one on, Rachel? Oh, she's multitasking, which is brilliant. Oh, hang on, we've gone back there. Brilliant. There, now the next one. Okay, so I did a Google search for mission and values. Okay, so this was the top hit. All right. Our mission is to inspire and nurture the human spirit. Next one, please. And our values. So this is the same organisation. Oh, why does it keep going back there? Our value is this next one. Here we go. Mission and values, our values. Creating a culture of warmth and belonging where everyone is welcome. Acting with courage, challenging the status quo, and finding new ways to grow our company and each other. Being present, connecting with, transparency, dignity and respect. Delivering our very best in all we do. Holding ourselves accountable for results. We are performance driven through the lens of humanity. Isn't that brilliant? Do you think that's a church? No. Next slide. This is Starbucks. The rest of their mission, I scrubbed it out of there. To inspire and nurture the human spirit. Brilliant. One person, one cup, and one neighbourhood at a time. Wow. Next one, please, Rachel. The mission values. What didn't come out there? Our values with our partners, our coffee, and our customers is our core. We live these values, blah, 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 blah. So that's a coffee company, their mission and values. So they're very clear, and what I love about that is they're really clear about what they want to try and do. So I work with a lot of churches, and a lot of churches aren't clear on their mission and their values. And when it comes to welcome, that's the place to start. Who are we trying to welcome? Who are we trying to attract to our church? Those statistics say that the church is hemorrhaging people all of the time. So we need to know what churches. Again, next slide is that question again. All right, this is Lynn Green. She's the General Secretary of the Baptist Union, or Baptists Together as they're called now. And I love this quote. It says, "We recognise we have a tendency to be cautious and sometimes play it safe. But we want to learn more about taking risks and having the humility to fail well. We want to pioneer and move beyond our comfort zone in order to engage with people who are spiritually hungry." I love that. I think I probably am a risk taker, but I look around at the majority of churches and there isn't a culture of risk taking. And to be honest, when we get into welcoming people, most people like them and are comfortable with people like them. I was at a youth event last night that was actually based at our church in Cardiff. And I was talking to the youth worker there afterwards, and I was thinking, what would we do if all these young people actually turned up tomorrow morning, Sunday morning? Because, boy, would that change the dynamic of our youth group. Because these children, they weren't nice. These children were different to the nice lower to middle class children, young people that we get. We naturally attract people like us, and we're very comfortable welcoming people like us. That question again, please, Rachel. What is church? The church, of course, should be a place of belonging. Next one, please. So, the church community, what does it mean to belong? What does it mean to be a place of belonging? Well, of course, it should mean that it's a safe place. It should mean a place of love, a place of meaning, a place of connection. But I wonder how many people walking past our churches even think that they're going to get that sort of welcome when they turn up, if they dared to move across the doorway into our church. Because to be honest, a church building is very alien. I love what has happened to this church, because this is it's contemporary, it's light, it's airy, but the majority of churches are still very cold, very damp, very old. So that whole kind of thing about looking what our welcome is like is really, really important. Now, next slide please, Rachel. This is something I'm learning about right now. So I am doing that course that Mark Griffiths has been battering on about all morning, the MA in, yes, it was Rick in the back. And these two words, I love these two words. Talk to Mark Griffiths about these two words, because he will do far more justice than I will be able to. And it's all about translation. So these two words here, bait is the first one, and mishpachor is the second one. So these are two completely different words that in our English translate as the same word, and that word is family. Now the bait family, from the original Hebrew, that is the immediate family. So that's mum, dad, or how your household looks. And this is really important because there are certain places in the Old Testament where they use bait, which means effectively people who live under the same roof, that they're your family. But that mishpachor, that's the community, the community that should be church. And the reason that we don't see the importance of these two words, the word family, is because we've only got that English word, family. So, for instance, the bait is the translation where you're in the Passover story. So you and your family are protected if you sacrifice the lamb and put the blood on the doorposts. That's bait family. Whereas the mishpachor is more of the community. So I don't know about when you were growing up, but when I was growing up, anybody in your street would look after the children of that road. So everybody felt a responsibility to watch out in case there was any dangers and all that kind of stuff. That's mishpachor. And of course that's what church should be. But as Mark was saying on the video earlier, we're third, maybe fourth generation away from that concern in the faith community for mishpachor. And the thing is, next one please. I completely forgot where I am now. All right, this is a really good quote. Those young people who are growing in their faith as adults were teenagers who fit into one of two categories. One, they came from families where Christian growth was modelled by at least one of their parents, or they had developed significant connections with the extended family, the mishpachor family of adults within the church. And I think one of the reasons that there is so much of a decline in the church these days is because we're not getting that mishpachor. There isn't that joint concern in the community for children, for young people. Knowing a local community, and therefore, for want of a better word, knowing your audience is essential to what local church ministry among children, young people and family is all about. Jesus himself said, I was sent to the lost sheep of Israel. Paul continued in this vein, I've been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the Gentiles, just as Peter was to the Jews. So they knew their calling and they knew their culture. And I think that's really, really important. So, do you know your target audience? Do you know the people that you're trying to reach? It's really easy to do that from the census. So, I've got some tips for you. How do we become that welcoming church if we're not already? And how do we create a culture of welcome? 6 tips. Next one, this is the first one. It seems obvious, positivity. So if we are welcome, if we're happy, if we've got a smile on our face, then that's obviously the first step. People are going to be attracted to people who look not attractive in that sense, but who look, actually, we're pleased to see you. So things like, I keep my strong about the cakes and the environment. These are the new ones. This is the church that I'm involved with. So glad that you're here. Now, if anything, that can be a little bit over the top. So to get into our church on a Sunday morning, you literally have to get past 6 people holding banners like this. That's before you get into the church. That's just off the road. So I was joking with Mark about this a little bit earlier. So if you're an extreme introvert, it's actually really difficult to get into our church because there's all these smiling people who are completely over the top. Welcome, it's so good. This is the car park, this way. So all that kind of stuff. But there is that culture of welcome, that culture of positivity. Once you even if you're a real extreme introvert, once you kind of get used to that, you kind of look forward to it. I'm kind of borderline introvert, extrovert, and I've got to be honest, once you get past the banners, you're greeted by normally a bunch of children with a box of sweets. That's 20 feet towards the church, and choose your sweet, whatever. Once you actually get into the door of the church, there's another 2 or 3 people saying, "Hi, is this your first time? Can I take you to the seat?" and all that kind of stuff, which is one of my hopes on going forward. Next one, please, Rachel. So being prepared. Do you have a culture in your church where you're ready to welcome new people? It's a great story. I was talking to our archdeacon and the church that he was vicar at before. About 10 years ago, they decided they wanted families. They didn't have any families, so they started a Sunday school. They didn't have any children, but they started a Sunday school, and they have a faithful team ready every week. Nobody came until one week, one family turned up, and they were ready for them. And now there's a thriving children's ministry, and it's just that whole thing about being ready. So, have you got somebody in charge of getting the cakes? Getting all the nice Danish pastries and all those kind of, making the coffee and all those kind of things. Are you ready, even if people aren't coming? Because it creates that atmosphere of welcome. That's really important. Next one, please, Rach. Okay, from street to seat. So if you've got people that are there for the first time, they know where the toilets are, all that kind of stuff. You've got somebody that is actually saying, "Okay, great to see you. Where would you like to sit?" Here you can sit. Some people like sitting in the front. If you like sitting in the front, we took the front row out actually, which is quite fun. But have people ready. So at Citizen Church, there are very few seats now available for people to sit in. So we've got people who are looking before people arrive to see where the spare seats are. If there are 2 seats together, this is where you can go. So and actually literally taking people from the door. Would you like to sit here? Do you want to be right in front of the speakers? Do you want to be, where are you comfortable sitting? So it's that whole kind of greet from street to seat, which rhymes nicely. Next one, we've touched on this already. The intentional welcome. It's that element of being ready Do you expect that people are going to come, or are you kind of, okay, nobody ever comes. There's nobody ever new that comes into our church. What is it that you can do to reimagine people that come into your church? That's the intentional welcome. And number 5 is nice refreshments. You refer back to the nice coffee. So many churches that I grew up through had just nasty coffee, and rich. There was always rich tea biscuits, and I was actually going to set up 2 different sides. I was going to put the nice pastries one side, and I was going to put rich tea biscuits the other side. And then for some reason there was always a stained tea towel over the back of the chair, and weak orange squash that was always slightly tepid. Maybe that's just the church that I went to. But it says something. If you've got something nice, even though it looks like I'm going to take all these beautiful donuts and things, it must be £11.20 to get all that stuff for you guys. Come on, eat them. But to be ready, so if nobody comes, have you still got the nice donuts? Have you still got the nice croissants or whatever you want? Because it says something. And point 6, please, Rach. The 99%. So I don't know about the statistics in Swansea, but in Cardiff, we're there. Our church exists for the 99% that don't come to church. So there's always an expectation that new people, first-time visitors, are going to be there every time. And all this kind of stuff, and all this stuff. And that is a budget implication. We put a lot of budget towards welcome and engaging with people and being friendly. Next one, please. So, the church exists primarily for the sake of those who are still outside it. You would think that that's a fairly modern quote, but that was William Temple. And it's many different versions of that have been said over the years. But basically it's saying the church is the only organisation that exists for its non-members. And the church should be constantly looking out for the people outside it, that sense of belonging. But next one please, who are those people who are outside the church? Who are the missing people? Do we know who they are? So before I got this job, I was working in Porthcawl, and I'd been reading that amazing book by Rick Warren, and he's got a character called Saddleback Sam. And what they'd done in America, they'd looked at the statistics. The typical person who lived in, I don't know if Saddleback is a city or a town or whatever, but they got the statistics of the people the typical person, and they changed everything to reach Sam from Saddleback. So I came up with this great idea. Let's create a character from Porthcawl and call him, stroke her, because it's clever, isn't it? Sam could be Samantha. Porthcawl Pat. Could be Patricia, could be Patrick. How in tune are we with culture? So we created this figure called Porthcawl Pat, and we looked on the census, and we discovered that the typical person living in Porthcawl was probably about 43. Probably, and this was really embarrassing, slightly less well educated than the national average. They didn't like me saying that. But we changed the way that we did ministry. We changed the way that we did welcome to reach, expecting that Pat was going to turn up to the door on a Sunday. I'd love to report back that the whole world changed because of that. It didn't. But it didn't work in the typical member of our congregation to be looking out for Porthcawl Pat and what that person needed. Because it changes. Once you start looking into this whole area of how are we going to do ministry, rather than doing ministry the way that we've always done it, which is probably out of date, but looking at what the person in your village, your town, your city looks like. Next one, please. So what do we need to be to welcome Portugal Pat, Swansea Steve, Newport Nora, I've written them all down here, Cardiff Carl, you know, so although Carl doesn't really translate kind of anyway. But what do we need to be to welcome those people who are typically in your kind of catchment area? What do we need to be to welcome them? Well, next one, we need to be relevant, we need to be passionate, we need a team. So the welcome team, if you haven't got one in church already, you need to form a team because one person can't do it by themselves. But it's all around that key word there, relationship. Now, some people have got the gift of hospitality. In fact, I don't know why I'm talking about this, because Helen, my wife, who's doing another seminar next, she's got the gift of hospitality. She loves to welcome people. You know, she can just go up to people and welcome them in the name of Jesus. And that is a spiritual gift, the gift of hospitality. So if you've got, I would say, if you've got a bunch of people, and there are loads of things online that you can do to discover your spiritual gift, you know, it's quite easy. So if you haven't got a welcome team, I would suggest that you find out who has got the gift of hospitality. Who is it that can make people feel at ease? You need to be relevant, you need to be passionate, you need to build a relationship with the people that you're trying to reach. Next one, please. A welcoming church where people feel welcome. Place of believing is the next bit. So this bit is all about, it's not just about belonging. And there is that kind of saying that's been going around for quite a few years, belonging to believe. And let's be really welcoming so that we can get people to feel at home. But for me, it is that belonging to believe. The gospel hasn't changed. Next one, please. The gospel has the power to change the world. So my youngest son is 18 now, which I can't even believe where that's gone. But when he was a little child, I would always put him to bed. I'd say my prayers with him, and he would always listen, because he knew that at some point I would pray that Jacob would grow up and change the world. And he knew that I was going to pray that at some point, which is why he always listened to the prayers, because he never wanted me to pray that. And he would always be there with his hand ready for whenever I slipped that line in, and that Jacob, because he didn't believe that he could do that. Now, I'm one of those crazy half-full people that believe that people can change the world, and that it's part of God's plan for us to change the world. The gospel is what changes the world. The people are the conduits to help do exactly that. And I'm still praying for that, even though he's 18, he's off to university in September, that he is going to be a complete world changer. And I've seen people do it again and again and again. Next one, please, Rach. Because this is the verse, of course, Romans 1, verse 16. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it's the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes. First to the Jew, etc., etc., etc. But everyone who believes. So we don't need to water down our gospel to be seeker-friendly. We need to, yes, help people to belong, but we need to keep the gospel central, because at the end of the day, people's lives changes the world. Believing is important. It's through faith that people are saved. In preparation for this, I read this. It says this. Listen, you have to listen. I didn't put this because there's too many words. The image that comes to mind is of a bakery on a cold, snowy day. Whiffs of delicious bread and hot chocolate occasionally waft outside. And a child has his nose pressed against the window pane. The glass is a barrier. Without it, the warmth and delicious smells would soon disperse in the cold wind, and no one would know there was anything good to be found there. But it's a transparent barrier, allowing that child to see the good things inside and invite him in. And there is a way in, a narrow door that he must walk through. Until he does, he can see and appreciate what's inside, but it's not his to enjoy. Once he walks through, it's his for the asking. When non-Christians encounter your church, it should be like standing at that window, not staring blankly at a brick wall. They should feel the warmth of your love as you welcome them, and engage them as people made in the image of God. They should see the depth of relationships as they witness people who have no reason to care for one another, go out of their way to serve. They should taste the richness of the gospel as God's word is preached and taught in a manner that connects with their lives. And they should hear the inviting sounds of joyful community as they listen to the praises and the prayers of the people who worshipped our crucified and risen Lord. So, go out of your way to create a community that welcomes the outsider. Give thought to the language you use. Be deliberate in your hospitality. Be strategic in your transparency, like a bakery that pumps the delicious smell of its bread outside. Publicly celebrate the stories of grace and transformation that are happening in your midst, and then, when you've done all else, make the gospel clear and invite people to respond to it in repentance and faith. Call them not to walk an aisle, but to enter through the narrow door and join with you in the riches of faith in the gospel. Next one, please. So we've had belonging, believing, and you're going to like this, be loving. I know it's not technically a word. But John 13, 34 to 35 says this: a new commandment I give to you, love one another as I've loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. And that's my final point. Belonging, believing, be loving. It's not rocket science. Welcome is all about showing love. It's all about showing value, and it's all about showing worth and respect to everyone. So, where do we go from here? How am I doing for time? Are we okay? We're okay. Is that 8 minutes I've got? So I'm up from the back. So, think about your church. Think about those 6 tips. Think about how positive you are as a church. How welcoming you are as a church. How inviting you are as a church. And think about if you're not kind of scoring 8 out of 10, think about what you can do to make that difference. So think about tomorrow morning. Are you intentionally thinking, okay, so think of a name, mind gone blank. Think of Bruce. I thought Bruce. Say Bruce turns up. How are you going to welcome Bruce into your family, into your mission call? How are you going to make Bruce feel like he's valued? Because Bruce is a real person. Where am I going with this? Bruce has got a name, and he's come to your church. So Bruce needs to be made to feel like he's part of your mission call, part of your family, your wider family. Let me finish with a story. Rob Parsons. You know Rob Parsons. He's like legend. And I got this from Helen, so it must be true. He tells a story of a church that he visited in Colorado Springs. That was a church where people felt like they belonged. Rob said that there were people who would come from all over to be a part of that family, that mishpachor. And many who had left the church earlier in their lives, when they came back, they said it was like they'd never left. Interesting. They knew that they belonged. The pastor said that there was a hell's angel came to church one Sunday. He had long, greasy hair. He had ironmongery in his face to open a small hardware shop. And he had tattooed on his hands the initials H-A-T-E on both sets of knuckles. You get the picture. I should have found them. I should so have found them. Anyway, he felt someone had dared him to come to church. So he was only there because it was a dare. He not only came to church, but when he went into the building, he walked right down to the front, quite arrogantly, sitting right in the front row. Obviously not used to going to church. Nobody ever does that. Unfortunately for him, he had sat himself in Marge Staples' area, whoever she is. Now Marge is almost 90. Marge doesn't have the energy these days to argue about whether we should worship swinging from the chandeliers or using the old red hymn book. Marge doesn't care whether the building committee built its way round, this way round or that way round, and she certainly doesn't care whether the carpets are grey or blue. Marge is going to be in front of Jesus any day now. Marge just wants to love people. She sees this man and she says, "Oh, young man, come here. It's so lovely to see you in church. Let me hug you." If you're an introvert. And she's hugging him and she feels the metal pressing into her face. And then she feels tears. This young man is starting to cry. She asks him to sit with her. He does not stop crying until the preacher finishes. He gives his life to Christ that night. 6 weeks later, a consultant plastic surgeon gives him a skin graft to remove the tattoos from his knuckles. Frankly, he had to. The guy was offending people as he was worshipping. When they baptised him, the wounds hadn't quite healed, and he had a plastic bag with an elastic band on as he went under the water. Marge Staples got it. Marge Staples understood what it means to belong. May we be the Marge Staples in our churches and communities. May we create a welcome. May we remember each and every name. May we listen and sit with and not rush to move on. May we ask the opinion of, may we remember that special milestone, and may we share our stories. I've got one more word, last slide please. This is my last B word, and again, does it come on? Or do I put it on? Behaving. Because how we do it really affects the welcome. It changes the way we behave, and that goes back to the way that we've changed the culture of our churches. So welcome is really, really important because it affects our belonging, our believing, our beloving, and our behaving. I think we've got 2 minutes to go, which is cool. Any questions? Do you think that this whole welcome thing is important?
Yes.
How do you find the people to do it? So, I would start with, if you Google spiritual gifts, discovery, whatever, there's lots of different tools online that you can take people through, and it will discover what your spiritual gifts are. So I would start with people who have the gift of hospitality, like I said, because not everybody can do that. If you don't have people with the gift, well, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about God has got everybody in the church for a particular role. Willow Creek is a big church in the States that back in the 90s, I think, came up with this thing called the network course. And the network course is all about not just discovering your spiritual gifts, but discovering your spiritual passions as well. And that's not rocket science. If you get people who are good at something that they love to do, then it's going to be amazing. I was in a church in Surrey working as a youth pastor, and we did that course as a whole church, and we discovered that most of the people in my children's ministry weren't passionate about doing children's ministry, and we released them, and like overnight we lost, I'd say probably about 60% of the people who were doing children's ministry at that point. But then we found that the people that we had left were absolutely passionate about evangelism, about discipleship, all things that Rick was talking about earlier. And we found that the numbers grew because the children actually realised that they were loved, valued, and felt of worth. We had the typical kind of people doing our children's ministry. They were parents and felt they had to. They didn't enjoy it, they weren't particularly good at it, but they were on a rota, so they did it. But we found the network course actually decimated our children's ministry team. But the people that we had on there were just brilliant. And I would say, so courses like the network course, I don't know if you can still get it now. That's how old it is. It was a video-based course. I would hope that there's an updated version of it. But something like that. So start with the people that you've got. Find out what they're passionate about. If they're passionate about welcoming people, then let them do it. Take them off the flower rota, or take them off the worship team, or take them off whatever they're doing if they're passionate about welcoming. I would imagine that the majority of people on this particular seminar, it would be you, because otherwise you wouldn't come to this seminar. That's a bit of a given. But you have the authority to welcome people. And I think welcome is such a forgotten thing, and yet it's people's first impressions of church is what welcome they receive. So that's how you find people, I would say. Anyone else? Have some cake. Thanks very much. Should we pray? That would be quite radical, wouldn't it? Praying in the church. Wow. Yeah, Jesus, I thank you for the people here, Lord. I thank you for what you've placed on our hearts to welcome people into our churches. And God, I pray for tomorrow morning, practically, God. I pray that you would encourage us right from tomorrow morning, that people would come into our churches, that we can talk to, that we can welcome. God, I pray that you would place on our hearts to be that welcoming church. That, God, you would place on our hearts to be that person of peace as people come into our churches. God, help us to expect people to come into our churches. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.